Such a wonderful studio audience.
Oh, I love it. Don't you love it? Hello, and welcome back to our next segment of Backstreet Gossip. And thank you for watching Hub Radio. We really appreciate it. The young man we have right in the center between us two good-looking guys is Randy Pullen. He looks about 30 years older than he did 5 weeks ago. And he's been one of the main guys down at the Arizona audit. America's audit, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
And this past week, as many of you know, there was a little bit of a tease, I guess you'd say, by the Arizona State Legislature about some of the findings. And oh my gosh, I'm absolutely amazed. Randy and I are both in the audit business, and I'm just appalled. I mean, I've never seen such overwhelming evidence of things, but you still got to give the benefit of the doubt to further research, and because there are some things that are loose ends. And Randy, why don't you just tell us about this? Everybody out there's. And by the way, I did want to tell everybody, if you haven't heard, we now have had people watching this and other shows here on Hub Radio over 2,044,000 views.
And we appreciate it.
And we do. Thank you, and keep it up. Keep passing this message around, because it's really important. Randy, you've got a letter here from the federal government, and they're not happy with Arizona.
Yeah, to say the least.
A little closer.
So Congress is coming after cyber ninjas. That's pretty clear what's going on here. And so we got the Committee on Oversight and Reform and the Civil Rights Subcommittee are coming after from the House, obviously led by Democrats. And as you read through this letter written to cyber ninjas, all their facts are coming from the media. They're quoting the media and all the many things they've released over the past couple months. And me, having been down there and actually involved in it, realized that most of what the media is saying is just flat out wrong.
Right.
Okay, but they didn't take the time in the Congress to do their research. They just started quoting these articles that were written by
Isn't this amazing? And these are people that make our laws, and
Right,
don't
but
even
it
bother to
doesn't-
research what they're saying.
Well, no, but it doesn't fit the narrative. You see, if they came and spoke to you in person and they found out the truth, that they couldn't put it in here.
Correct. I mean, we wouldn't have this letter
Right.
if they had the actual facts.
So, Randy, I'm curious. I mean, you've been in this industry for a long time. You sat as the head. You've been involved. Did you ever think, during your entire career, during all of the public service that you've done, that we'd ever be in a position where we'd have to double check and people were fighting that we did it correctly? Did you ever think that would happen?
Well, no, I didn't, because as Ron knows, as a former auditor, I was an auditor with Deloitte & Touche, partner there, and I did plenty of forensic level audits of banks back in the day. And usually, when I say usually, 99.999% of the time, they would cooperate with you. So you would do the audit at their facility. The managing leaders would work with you if you had questions. If you didn't understand how something was, they would help you find the facts you needed. The first thing you always do in audit is you look at internal controls.
Exactly.
So if you don't
Compliance
have
to
access to
controls.
internal controls, there's no way you can really be doing a great audit. And that's why it becomes a forensic audit, because you got to look at everything. You have to do all the work. You're getting no help from what we would call the client, right? They're not cooperating, and in fact, and sometimes they're obstructing your efforts when you ask for the routers, and because you just want to check the router and just confirm that they're saying that there's no access to their main servers, the EMS servers, that you can confirm that and say, yeah, there was no access. But if they don't provide those to you after you've subpoenaed and the judge said you could have that, that's obstruction.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And now I will tell you, having worked for back in the 80s when we had the savings and loan crisis, that I did some work for the comptroller of currency on one of the banks in New England. And I can guarantee you, if I'd walked in and they had said to me, "We're not going to help you and you can't stay here and work here," I would have made one phone call to comptroller, the currency, and the FBI would have been there immediately to arrest them all. Right?
And,
Well,
Ron, what's really strange is I happen to listen to it, and I think somebody told me that it was already off YouTube or Facebook, but when they gave us the update, and President Fan was up there, and she very meticulously went through every single item. Here's
And
what we're
very
looking for.
courteously, I might
Yes.
add. Very
I
courteously.
think it was.
Exactly.
I think it was.
Yeah.
We found out that your receipt of the information that you needed to audit was scrambled. It wasn't in any order. There were seals that were broken. There were administrative passwords that were used by multiple people. And that you, during that audit process, during the accounting process, you put things into an orderly fashion that normally in an audit, it would have already been in an orderly
You would
fashion.
expect it in that order.
Yeah. So you invested your time, your effort, and every time. And this is what I don't know if everybody realizes this, especially the taxpayers here in Arizona. But every time the Board of Supervisors says, "No, we're not going to cooperate," it takes more time and more taxpayer
It's called
money.
slow walking. It's
Right,
called slow
but,
walking.
But we pay for it as taxpayers. We're paying for them to slow walk. So it could have been done efficiently. It could have been done with expediency. It could have been done in an orderly fashion. But they really didn't even give you the tools for you
No.
to be able to do that.
No. And it's just to go back to one of the things you said about the passwords. I'm not going to tell you what the passwords are, but they're very, very simplistic passwords, and they haven't been changed in 2 years.
Like 1, 2, 3, go. Like
I'm not going to say what it is, but I mean,
Maybe like
exclamation point.
maybe like password.
yeah, the standard is that if you have a long, complex password, these days they don't even tell you need to change them anymore.
Right.
But if you have a very short, simple password, you need to change that on a routine basis,
Well,
and not every 2 years.
It seems to me that if you have multiple people, I'll throw out a number. You have 20 people that all are using the exact same password. Any one of those 20 could be altering, making mistakes, whatever, but there's no accountability.
There's no chain of custody.
But isn't that one of the most important things in
It
an
is,
election?
and that's one of the things that's been asked for, and it will be coming out in the new subpoena. I don't know when that's going to happen, but one of the things in there, they want the complete chain of custody within the county to see how everything was delivered to the end of the election.
Ron, it seems to me, and I'm sorry. Let me.
Yeah, I was
just-
going to say, I
Go
got to
ahead,
get a
go
question.
ahead, yeah.
Randy, I want you to make a statement here, and I know the answer because, as I said, I've been an auditor. But this kind of bothered me when I first heard this, that the word is out that these people do not meet the standards. They are not certified to do forensic auditing of elections.
Are you talking about cyber ninjas?
Yes, and this is the criticism that this group here, the feds and the county officials have said. Now, why is that, Randy, that they don't meet those standards?
Well, because that's what the county said, and that's what the press has said. But the reality is, the U.S. Election Commission said there are no standards. Okay.
So you go it alone. You set the pace. It's never been done before. And that's why there are no standards. These people have done a remarkable job. As an auditor, I can speak to that. I am amazed at how complex and how orderly this process went.
Well, I looked at the prior audits, what they called audits that were done. I read their reports from the county, okay? And you as an auditor know, as you read through it and you see what they did and how simple it was, and how they got the data was provided to them ahead of time. In other words, they didn't get to pick the data they got to look at. It was provided by the county what they could look at. What would you call that in an audit? Is that an audit?
No, it's a.
What will we call it?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to get gross on the air.
We would call it a review or a compilation, but it ain't an audit.
I would call it a joke, I guess would
Now,
be the most
could you
polite.
imagine? Could you imagine if the IRS said to you, "We looked at your taxes, we want to audit it," and you say, "Of course, let me provide you with this, and that should be fine." What would the IRS say? No, we want to see. We want to see more. We want to pick and choose what we want to audit, because if you're handing something to us, it just seems this whole process, not this particular election, but maybe many elections before that, it was done in a way that people knew that it would not be audited. So this is acceptable.
Yes.
It's not the way it
that's
should be, but
right.
it'll be fine. And nobody's going to check. Just go ahead and do it.
And you can see that they claim they did a hand count. I mean, if you look at the number of ballots they counted in their hand count, given all the problems we've already shown that are in the system, it wouldn't even be close to what an auditor would require in terms of how many transactions to see, right?
Oh, yes.
Or votes. It would be a lot more than what they did. So again, it doesn't meet any of the standards that you and I grew up with within the audit.
Well, first of all, if you have an adding machine that has a missing key to it, and you count the ballots originally with the missing key, and then you said, "Gee, that's got to be right. Let's prove it again. Let's do it with the same piece of equipment that we know is defective," and that's what they did. And they said, "Oh, well, it balances. Wow." Of course, it balances. You're using the same broken equipment.
You made reference, Randy, to that they weren't certified by what is the committee
U.S.
called?
Election Commission.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what is the U.S. Election Committee? Who are
Commission.
these commission? Who are these
It's a-
people, and what experience or what certification do they have to be in that position?
Well, they made up the certification. They created the certification, okay?
So they put a stamp on it that they created themselves.
And I believe that organization was established and created by President Obama.
Correct.
Okay, so President Obama creates a new commission that has a carte blanche on whatever they'd like to say is certified, is not certified. It's just put together haphazardly.
I wouldn't call it haphazardly, but I would say it doesn't meet the qualifications you would expect to see. Okay, and again,
Right,
I would just
standards,
go back.
the standards weren't there.
Yeah, I would just go back and again say the U.S. Election Commission said there is no standard for conducting an audit. Okay, so if they say there's no standard, then how can they set a standard?
How can they not meet that
they
non-standard?
they
So
have-
the whole statement they made was a phony baloney statement. They never should have made it because it's based on thin air.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, are you familiar with what a risk limit audit is? If you look at what they
Yeah.
call a risk limit audit, what it really does is it reduces down the amount of actual auditing you have to do, the number of votes you have to look, the number of ballots you have to look at, to simplify the process. And if you had a perfect system and all the internal controls were perfectly done and you could see that everything was done perfectly, yeah, you could take a very small segment and look at it. But when you have a situation where we've already shown all the problems there are with these ballots and the way they keep them, that means you can't do a small batch. You got to do a bigger batch, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And so in this case, the decision the Senate made was to do a complete count of all the ballots. Okay, so that means you're going to see everything.
The larger the sample, the more accurate
You will get.
Now, were they
Right.
able to get the actual digital images of the ballots as well? 'Cause
Yes.
I know that was a big controversy.
They did image them, yes.
Okay, so as many of you know, when you take the written ballot and you put it through the machine, it takes a digital image of it. That goes into one file, and then the paper one goes over here. So ultimately, at the end, when you audit it, you say, I have 100 paper ballots, I have 100 digital images. Now, was there a huge discrepancy? Have they had a chance to go through those digital images, cross-referencing?
They have been going through them, and I've seen some of the counts, and they're pretty darn close, like one or two different, So again, not a surprise.
Now in Georgia, Ron, we had talked about in Georgia, one ballot had been sent through several times. They
Yes.
showed it up on the screen. They had the exact different markings, mistakes, and everything. They were numbered different. They had different file numbers, but they found that to be the case in Georgia. Have we looked into that here?
Well,
in
let
Arizona
me
as
tell
well?
you what there is and what the imaging shows, and we've already showed examples of this on Thursday. But on the front of the ballot, there's a little circle with kind of a crosshair in it, and on the back of the ballot, there's another little crosshair that fits right in the middle of that circle. Okay, and that's how you tell it's an official ballot. Okay, now we have lots of them where it's not even close to being in the circle.
So what
Okay.
would that mean? I
Well,
mean, if-
what it really means is that there's something wrong with that ballot. Now, what do we think's wrong with it? Well, again, that's why we're looking at the different kinds of paper, because what happened, at least what we're aware of, is that at these voting centers they ran out of paper because there was a big turnout. Okay, so they're out of paper, so they have to go get some paper, and so when they get this other paper and they try to print a ballot on it, it doesn't print it accurately. And so if that little crosshair is not in the middle of the circle, that means it's not an official ballot. Okay?
So by statute, are they to be counted or not counted? Is it the fault of the machine? Is it the fault of, I mean, where does the liability
when
come
they
in?
printed the ballot, and I'm not saying they came in the side doors, I'm saying they were printing ballots at these centers, okay, and they ran out of the official paper, and so the official paper already has that on it. So all you're really doing is determining which exact elections you should be putting on there, because every precinct is different. You know, they might have a school board election or something. Okay, the next precinct doesn't have that one. And so they have to print the ballot according to what precinct and what their address is. Well, when you run out of the official paper and then you go buy paper and you're trying to print it, it ain't going to come out right.
Right.
Okay, so technically it's an unofficial ballot, but they counted it anyway because they were there.
I was just going to
And
say.
how do I know they counted it? Because we have the unofficial ballot that doesn't line up, and clearly it was counted as part of a batch.
Right.
Okay, now, what does that mean in terms of the law? I mean, I know that we have official ballots. I know
You got to ask that guy over there.
we will. He's going to come on shortly. I'm just trying to give him a heads up. He's just a new dad. You know that. And
I
he-
know.
Yeah, and I
I
figured
don't know.
he's not.
Has he seen this letter from the Congress yet?
He's not sleeping. Have you seen the congressional letter?
The one from the
Here, you might wanna-
that they want to investigate the audit?
Here.
Yeah.
Do a quick study, and we'll ask for a legal opinion in 10 minutes.
So I think a lot of where we are now is due to changing what had worked for years and years, where you vote at your own precinct.
Yes.
Everybody knows who you are. They're paper ballots. They can be counted right away. If you live in Maricopa County on the west side and you're in East Mesa and you go over there and they have to print your ballot for your district and your precinct, that seems like it's a big
It
issue.
complicates it. It
Yeah.
complicates it a lot.
And it
that's-
should be simple, shouldn't
right.
it?
And the more you complicate things, that means the more issues and problems you're going to have, right?
Well, back to the original. Okay, so they ran out of paper. So somebody.
As we say, slow is easy and easy is fast, right?
Yeah, but you run out there. I mean, you run over to Staples and buy a whole ream of paper for voting.
Well, I just said I don't know where they bought. But
No,
they-
I mean I've just used that as facetiously, but
Or
is
as our
there-
vice
is there
president
anything-
said, you can run over to Kinko's and pick it up.
Is there
Even
anything-
though it's been closed for what, 15, 20
is
years?
there anything in the law that says that that's legal to go and use it? I mean, could I run out and get a piece of? Well, here's an 8x10. Run that through. Here's my vote.
Are
right
they,
here.
in other words, are they allowed to use random paper for these machines?
Well, apparently they are because they did it, right? So the
Well, that
point-
doesn't mean that it's-
no, I understand that. My point is they ran out of paper, and it's like, what do you do now? Okay, and so that means they had to do something, and so they went out and got paper. So I understand what they were doing. Was it the right thing to do? Maybe it was because they had no other choice. Okay, what are you going to do? Tell people they can't vote?
You would think that they would have enough paper, considering that that Adrian Fontes printed all of these ballots at taxpayer expense, and we don't even know where they are.
Exactly. Well, Ron, so if
That's
if
another
you're,
issue.
if you were the controller of a company or a business or a bank, and you ran out of invoice papers, and you said, "Well, I don't have any more. I can't print any invoices," what would they do to you?
Well, there's a big difference though between an invoice and a ballot.
It is, and it
and
is,
there's
but
also
it's-
a big difference between an invoice and a crisp new $100 bill that I could run over and get some paper and say, run that through.
Well, Josh Bernstein, who's on our Wednesday show, joshbernsteinuncensored.com, he had mentioned that there is an email out, and it's from somebody at the election, involved in the election, that there were specifics given to use ink pens up into a certain date, and then it was changed to use Sharpies. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I know on his
Yes.
website that they talked about it as well, and I think he even has those emails that are out. I believe that the ballots specifically say don't use
Sharpies.
anything other than ballpoint
Ballpoint
pens.
Black or blue?
Yeah, so when you were doing the investigation, not you, but when the volunteers were there, and they were looking at it with the high resolution DSLRs, you could tell if it was an ink pen because it pressed down, the fibers were different than if it was printed or if it was used a Sharpie, right?
Correct. You could tell the difference between. I actually looked at some of the imaging, with high resolution camera, and you could tell the difference between the different kinds of.
Was it
fill-in.
hard? Was it looking at like a dangling Chad that you saw the
No,
pictures
no,
of the
no.
guy, or was it?
No, but
was
let
it
me
fairly
tell you
blatant?
what the problem is on the Sharpies is they do bleed through.
Right.
And so the point that was made by the county and supposedly is that the way they align the races so that the ovals don't overlap, so that the bleed through doesn't cause a problem. But I saw ballots, and they also showed ballots on Thursday, which showed that there was bleed through, and it was very close to an oval on the other side, which would have maybe led to potential overvote.
So it's not
Okay.
so much that it's a Sharpie pen that is used. The issue is the bleed through
Bleed through.
from that Sharpie.
Correct. Exactly. That is the issue. If they're not, now the point that they were making, or remember going back to the election, they were saying, "Oh, well, it doesn't matter because the way they're printed front and back, the oval bleed through isn't going to cause a problem on the other side." Well, I've seen them where it would cause a
did.
problem.
Well, but to your
Okay.
point, if that crosshair didn't line up, it would almost purposely bleed through on an area that wasn't intended to.
Because it's not official paper.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Let me ask you this question. I've been curious. Of course, our dear friend John Brakey is many times on the show, and he's been very insistent that the ballot images be counted. And you're saying they have now been counted.
Or in the
different-
process, I think.
with different equipment,
Yeah,
correct?
it's being. Yeah, it's the
Is
last.
it still being done, or it's?
Yeah, it's gonna. We brought in 3 or 2, and we have 3 as of tomorrow, counting machines that are set up, and we're running all of the ballots through.
And they're not
those
through
as another
Dominion?
count. No.
And they were all certified by the.
Yes, they're all certified machines.
And
but
because
they're
we've
called
been
Bantam
led,
ones.
we've been led to believe that only the Dominion equipment can read these things. Of course, that's another big fallacy. So the question that I would have then is, these machines can count every dot. Are we going to be looking at
We're not
every election?
counting every dot. What we're doing is we're counting the number of ballots to certify the number of ballots. That
Okay,
were
so
in
the
there.
ballots, the ones that were received and the ones that are counted, we should have the same number,
Correct.
without regard to who was voted on. If we have
Correct.
2 million ballots going in, we should have 2 million ballots
Exactly.
coming out.
2,089,300.
Okay, so and we
Expect
should
to
have
see 'em both.
both those numbers should balance.
Yes.
Now, Randy, one thing that I really appreciated from the very beginning, whether it was Ken Bennett, whether it was a President fan, or you as well when you were on the show, is the whole purpose and intent of an audit is not to prove that Donald Trump won or didn't win. The purpose of the audit from the very beginning has been, was everything done correctly according to the statute, the law?
It's a compliance
Right.
issue.
That's what an audit is. You're looking at the compliance, that they follow all their policies and procedures appropriately, and if they did, well then, that's good.
So what would you say to the talking heads that say, no, from the beginning, all they want to do is prove that Donald Trump won? What would you say to them?
What would I say? I don't know why they would say that. I mean, clearly, what we're seeing is that, and I don't know what the final count will be, but let's just, for an assumption, say that there was 11,000 votes for Biden that should have been for Trump. Okay. Now, does that mean Trump is now getting the delegates? No, that's not changing. He's still,
Well, that's what I've been. I know a lot of people argue with me. I said it's already been certified. It's already
Yes,
gone
it's a certified election.
through. It's gone through those people in the county.
it's gone to the Secretary of State, it's gone through the governor, it's
the Congress.
Congress. You know, it's
And so from at least at some point everything was legal. Maybe the election had problems, but from
Well,
that
it was certified.
standpoint-
I won't say it was legal.
certified.
But I would say
yeah,
it was
they're
certified.
certified.
Well,
And you just can't say. And now here's the problem. And we're going to go into some of these numbers. And I've got a good report here as to what some of the numbers that was discussed. A lot of people say, "Oh, 74,243 ballots were we have more than what were sent out." Okay, supposing that's true. But we don't know if all of those were for one candidate or the other candidate. You don't know who they were
well,
for.
you don't even know that. I mean, what we're talking about here are EV3 and EV2
Right.
ballots. Okay, so a regular mail-in ballot is one thing, but you can go to a polling and before the election day, and you could vote early.
Right.
Okay, and so that ballot was done right there at that location. You folded it up, put it in the envelope, you gave it to them, and it was done. Well, that's different from a mail-in ballot.
Right.
Because when you come in to do that, you got to show your ID to get it.
Right.
Right?
It's not signed the affidavit on the
So
envelope.
it's unclear from the information that they have, that Cyber Ninjas had, and they reported this on Thursday. It was unclear whether those were mail-in ballots or whether those are election day ballots. There's no way to tie that together.
Wow.
And that's the problem with the paper ballots, is that a lot of the stuff you expect to see is not there, because, and you know, this is the real point here, which is that you have a paper ballot, you feed it into the tabulator, and once that happens, that paper ballot doesn't matter anymore. It's what's in the tabulator and the EMS system that matters. So once the ballot's in there, the election is being run by the equipment and the software. It's no longer people involved, it's the equipment that's running it.
And what about this, the fractional voting? Has that
Well,
come
that's-
up at all
no,
in
no,
this
no.
audit? Or
Well, yeah, well, it was brought up. We had a guy that came in, very sharp guy, I have to give credit.
Guy from
was
Tennessee,
yeah, he was.
Fraction Magic.
Yeah, exactly. He was explaining how that works. It was very interesting. But at this point, we don't have anything that would indicate that occurred.
Okay. It seems as though the letter that the commission wrote to Cyber Ninjas was basically trying to debunk the process of the audit to have any results say, well, these aren't valid results. It's almost as though they're trying to prove that everything was done exactly correct without an audit.
Well, based on what we're seeing, we know that I have seen batch numbers that are on two boxes. So how do you have a batch number for 200 ballots that's marked on two separate boxes? How can that same batch be in two different boxes? Well, it can't. So it's a mistake.
Right.
Okay, and you look in the box, and there's supposedly they were going to be in individual bags, each batch. They weren't. They were just stacked in the box, and they're supposed to have a pink sheet of paper in between each one that says which batch this is and what the number is. Well, guess what? Sometimes there wasn't anything in the box.
Yeah, and they said sometimes it was supposed to be, well, it was
Or it was
supposed
over
to
on
be
the side.
placed, horizontally,
And there's
but
no
it was
way to
actually
tell which
vertically.
batch
On the
is
side,
which
yeah.
batch. Okay, so
That must have been a
again,
mess.
So we're talking about procedures. They were not following their own procedures, and that's what causes problems.
Which in and of itself is a reason to do an audit and to make sure that everything is done as it should be.
So if you haven't ever had an audit done before of all your ballots, then what are you really doing with those ballots? Because the count that really matters is in the machine, right?
Right.
So those ballots, they're just being boxed up because in 22 months, what's going to happen?
Destroyed.
They're going to be destroyed. So then the evidence is gone.
Yeah.
So you've never seen how badly they ran.
That's probably why they were
The
slow
election.
walking it. They were hoping to stretch it for
So
22
Ron,
months.
you and Randy both being auditors, right? And to see what we've gone through to get to this point, would you say that there should be a standard that just says, you know what, we should do an audit every 3 cycles, every cycle, or we have the option to do an audit every time, and it should just be, okay, it goes from A to B to C to, and everybody expects this can be audited at any time. Would you say that that would be a great standard?
I think that we have to realize that, again, the Constitution gives the legislature control of elections, not the counties. The counties
Or the Attorney General.
or the Attorney
or the
General
Governor.
or,
Or the
exactly.
Secretary of State.
It's the legislature.
Okay,
has,
guys,
should
we're
have control.
the music's playing. We're going to have to sell a few products here, and don't go away, Randy's. Don't get too jumpy here. You haven't gotten away from us yet.
He's staying.
We're gonna
Well, I thought we're bringing-
let Colladin do the questioning now. We're gonna put you under oath, Randy. At any rate, you're listening to Hub Radio Phoenix. We will see you on the other side. Support these sponsors, please.